There's something about Levon Cade you notice the moment he walks into a room. Not flashy, not loud, but still, he fills the space. He carries himself like someone who's seen a lot, lost more than most, and yet still manages to stand upright in a world that keeps trying to knock him down. These days, Levon keeps to himself. He works construction jobs quiet, honest labor that leaves his hands raw and his muscles sore. He doesn't ask questions, doesn't cause trouble, doesn't stay in one place too long. Most nights, he sleeps in the cab of his truck alone with nothing but the sound of the wind and the creak of old leather to keep him company. But Levon wasn't always this way. He used to have something to live for, a family, a wife, a little girl named Mary who lit up his entire world. He came back from the military thinking he could start overbuild something better than what he'd known. He wanted to be the kind of father he'd never had, someone who could protect and provide. But life doesn't always play fair. His wife, God bless her, tried to hold on, but she never made it out of the darkness. Depression, grief, maybe even the ghost of Levon's past. It swallowed her whole. One night, she ended it, left Levon behind to pick up the pieces and left Mary without a mother. Levon did everything he could to keep it together, worked long hours, slept wherever he could, cooked dinners in parking lots. But when social services came knocking, all they saw was a broken man with no home and no stability. They took Mary away, placing her with relatives who could give her what Levon couldn't. And just like that, he lost the only thing that still made sense. But he didn't give up. He made himself a promise. One day, he'd get Mary back, no matter how long it took, no matter how hard it got. That was the plan until the day Jenny Garcia disappeared. Jenny was the daughter of Joe Garcia, Levon's boss at the construction site. Smart, headstrong, and with a bit of fire in her eyes. Levon didn't know her well, but he'd seen her around her talking about college, about getting out of town. She reminded him of Mary in all the worst ways. One morning, she was gone, just vanished. At first, people assumed she'd run away. Teenagers do that. Maybe a boyfriend, maybe trouble at home. But Joe knew his daughter and he knew this wasn't right. Something had happened. Joe begged the cops to take it seriously, but they were slow to move. Missing teenagers aren't exactly top priority when resources are stretched thin. And Levon? Well, he tried not to get involved. Told himself he had enough on his plate. Told himself it wasn't his problem. But something about Joe's desperation, his voice cracking as he described Jenny's laugh, the way she used to sneak cookies after dinner cut through Levon's walls, he knew that pain. The feeling of being powerless, of knowing the world doesn't care about your grief. So Levin started digging. And what he found chilled him to his core. Jenny hadn't run away. She'd been taken kidnapped by a brutal human trafficking ring tied to the mafia. These weren't petty criminals. These were organized predators, people who saw girls like Jenny as inventory. Disposable, replaceable. That should have been the end of it. Levon could have walked away, turned off the engine, kept his head down. But he didn't. Because this time, he couldn't. He reached out to the only person he trusted, Gunny. Gunny was a fellow veteran, a man who'd seen more war than most and paid a heavy price for it. He lost his sight years ago, but what he lacked in vision, he made up for in instinct. Gunny was more than just muscle. He was Levon's conscience, his anchor. Together, they formed a plan to call the cops or negotiate, but to hunt. To follow the trail, no matter how dark it got. Levon wasn't trying to be a hero. He was trying to stop another father from living through the same hell he did. Step by step, Levon worked his way through the underworld. He tracked contacts, interrogated thugs, beat answers out of men who thought they were untouchable. Every night brought a new bruise, a new scar, but also a new lead. And with every lead, the picture grew clearer. Jenny was still alive, but time was running out. The gang started to notice. Word spread some ex-military guy was causing problems. A ghost with fists like iron and no fear of dying. They didn't know who he was, but they knew he was getting too close. So they did what monsters always do. They made it personal. They found out about Mary. They found out where she was. They made threats promises even. Said if Levon didn't back off, if he didn't walk away, they'd make sure his daughter disappeared too. They didn't understand the man they were dealing with. Levon didn't run. He roared. He moved Mary to safety, sent her to stay with Gunny's wife in a quiet place no one could find. Then he turned all his fury toward the gang. Warehouses were burned, stashes raided, members interrogated and left crawling. Levon was methodical, relentless. He wasn't just trying to save a girl anymore, he was dismantling a kingdom of predators. And then he found her. Jenny was being held in a secluded compound outside the city and old property, surrounded by fences and men with guns. It was supposed to be impenetrable, but Levin didn't care. He went in alone. What happened inside wasn't a rescue, it was a reckoning. Gunfire echoed through the walls. Fists met flesh. Men who'd made a living off of fear suddenly found themselves begging for mercy they'd never shown others. When Levon reached Jenny, she could barely speak, but she recognized him, and she knew she was safe. He carried her out himself. But there was one man left, Corvino, the mastermind, the trafficker, the one who had profited off pain, fought politicians, and thought he was immune to consequences. Levon didn't give him a chance to run. Their final confrontation wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about making a point. It was about ending the nightmare. And when it was over, Corvino was nothing more than another name scratched off a long, bloody list. Levon brought Jenny home. There were no headlines, no medals, no parades, just a tearful father hugging his daughter like it was the first time he'd breathed in weeks. And Levon? He didn't stay for thanks. He didn't need it. He went to find Mary. She ran to him, arms wide open, eyes full of trust. She didn't care where he'd been or what he'd done. All she knew was that her daddy had come back. In the days that followed, Levon didn't talk much. He didn't relive the fights, the pain, the darkness he'd stepped into. Instead, he spent quiet mornings in the backyard, sitting beside Gunny and Mary. He watched the sunrise, grilled food, laughed, exhaled. He finally let himself feel something he hadn't in years. Peace. Because for all the blood, all the violence, all the loss, she'd won something back. Not just a girl from a gang, but a future with his daughter